Sometimes death comes like a gentle period at the end of a sentence. Other times it crashes in with exclamation marks and interrogatives, loud, messy, and unfinished. And sometimes it's those interrogatives, those unanswered questions that refuse to soften. They hang in the air sharp and unrelenting, never letting the story rest. There is no grave for Lauria Bible and no grave for Ashley Freeman. No place where stone marks the fact that they existed and then were gone. What stands in place of a headstone are questions, cold, foreboding, and carved even deeper every year. One mother, Lauria Bible, has spent over 2 decades chasing those questions, trying to lay them to rest so she can finally lay her daughter to rest too. But in a town this small, truth doesn't come easy because small towns talk, but they also bury things. And if you want answers, you'll have to sift through the ashes and smoke and silence. This is Crime to Burn, and today we begin unraveling a case that still smolders in the dark corners of Oklahoma's history. A fire that consumed a home and left behind 2 bodies, 2 missing girls, and a community drowning in unanswered questions. This is the story of Lauria Bible, Ashley Freeman, and the night 4 people disappeared into smoke and silence. The night when suspicion became a permanent resident of Welch, Oklahoma. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter.
And I'm professionally unqualified to be here, but emotionally overinvested. Coming to you from a secret bunker behind the laundry room. And yes, I do hear everything you say through the vents.
Please be sure to follow us on social media, including YouTube, X, Instagram, and TikTok. We have a ton of new listeners, and we welcome each and every one of you. And we humbly ask that if you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and written review wherever you listen. If you listen on Good Pods, Podbean, or Spotify, you can always leave comments on the individual episodes as well. Those reviews, ratings, and comments tell the algorithm that our audience is listening and engage and encourage it to push us out to more people so we can find our audience. Likewise, interacting with our social media content with likes, comments, and shares is super helpful, and we thank each and every one of you that takes the time to do that. Finally, you can support the show by being our personal billboard and buying some Crime to Burn merch on our spread shop. Links are in the show notes. And as always, feel free to reach out to us with feedback, case suggestions, and your personal fire stories at crimetoburn@gmail.com. There's also another way that you can support the show if you are in the market for a dog containment system. As you're all likely well aware, we do have a dog, Winston, and we desperately love Winston, but Winston is high energy and low impulse control.
And he's just one backyard away from a misdemeanor.
And we were desperate to find a containment system to keep him in our yard but allow him to run free to work off some of that hound dog energy. So after several failed attempts to use GPS and satellite collars from other brands, we purchased the Polaroids wireless dog fence. No wires, no digging, no drama. It gives him the freedom to run.
Without turning the neighbor's garden into a crime scene.
Just sweet, invisible boundaries. Because Winston doesn't need a rap sheet.
Just a radius.
We've been so happy with the Polaroids system that we contacted them and asked if we could be an affiliate, and they agreed. So if you're looking for a concern-free canine containment contraption to save your sanity, visit www.pawis.com, that's P-A-W-I-O-U-S, and if you use the code CRIME2BURN at checkout, you will get 10% off your purchase. Or you can find the affiliate link in our show notes. For each purchase made using the code CRIME2BURN, we will receive a small commission. But seriously, it's the first system we found that truly works to keep Winston happily hanging at home.
Instead of being the neighborhood's hooligan hound.
So zoom me right on over to www.pawis.com and remember to use the code CRIME2BURN at checkout. A few things this week before we dive into the case. First of all, the Michelle Taylor case goes to sentencing on May 30th, and that is just days away, and our episode on her has picked up some traction, but we really need to ensure that as many people as possible hear about her case and the problems with the Florida State Crime Lab before her sentencing, so please go check out our episode Framed by Forensics, the Michelle Taylor case. and the follow-up episode Behind the Byline, where we interview Liliana Segura, the amazing investigative reporter that broke the case. She brings us even more information on just how bad the problems at the Florida State Crime Lab are, so be sure to share that case with everyone you know leading up to Michelle's sentencing. In addition, late last year we brought you the absolutely unhinged case of a former Maryland police chief named David Michael Crawford that went on a serial arson spree in Maryland and was convicted in Howard County. That case had been pending appeal, and the appellate court ruled this week that David Michael Crawford will not get a new trial. Now, I have reached out to Crawford's attorney to ask if he's planning another appeal, and I have not yet heard back, but we'll let you know if we hear of anything. But now that this appeal is settled, we're planning on possibly bringing you some follow-up episodes, so stay tuned for more news on that front. But for now, it's just great news that the appellate court upheld his conviction. Alright, let's talk about sources for a minute. As always, sources are in the show notes, but my main source for information on this case is a book by Jax Miller. The book is called Hell in the Heartland, and if you would like a deeper dive into the case and its crazy twists and turns, I do recommend it. There are some areas where the narrative got a little confusing and the timeline got a little hard to follow here and there, but Jax Miller indicates that she did change the names in the book to protect people in certain situations. So there are some facts from the book that are impossible to corroborate through outside sources. In addition, Jax indicated in the prologue that she did take some literary liberties in her telling of the case, and my impression is that she did this in describing events that she knows to be true from her research, but she added in details to enhance the storytelling that don't affect the facts. For example, she may talk about things that happened and making assumptions about what people might have been thinking or feeling. So I tried my best to stick to the facts that can be corroborated through other sources, but where that is likely impossible is where she did have to change names. So there may be some facts that I included from Jax's book that were necessary in order to explain the case, but that I don't have the actual names to corroborate the facts. There may also be occasional instances where I inadvertently include something of Jax Miller's personal literary liberties, and any such instances are unintentional. But I want to give Jax Miller ample credit for her hard work on this case, because we wouldn't be able to bring you this level of detail without her work.
Jax is a chick?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what's that short for?
I don't know, it's just JAX. She also describes spending months, if not years, in Oklahoma investigating everything that she could about this case, and she worked directly with the Bible family in trying to get justice for both their daughter and the Freemans. And in light of these facts that she was working with the family directly, I feel pretty confident that the overall facts presented in her book, even where they can't be independently corroborated, are likely reliable. So let's go back to December 29th, 1999. Christmas lights still twinkled in the windows of small-town Oklahoma. The air held that strange quiet between holidays when the joy of Christmas hasn't quite faded and the promise of New Year's still lingers in the air.
Prince is on the radio singing that song.
Yeah.
Tonight we're gonna party.
1999. For Ashley Freeman and Lauria Bible, it was a day for sleeping in, for laughing, for celebrating something else entirely. It was Ashley's 16th birthday. And there were things to do, driver's licenses to earn, pizza to eat, and birthday candles to blow out. By all accounts, it was a day as it should have been, a pizza dinner, a birthday cake, and a silver necklace gifted to Ashley by her boyfriend Jeremy Hurst. That night, huddled in the Freeman's trailer, were Ashley, her best friend Laura, her boyfriend Jeremy, and her parents Danny and Kathy Freeman. But silently lurking among the people who loved Ashley most was an absence that somehow had a presence of its own. It clung to the edges of that birthday gathering like a shadow no one wanted to name. It was felt, if not spoken. Shane Freeman should have been there, Ashley's older brother, her protector. In his place, Ashley's grief, because he couldn't be there because Shane was gone. The proof that he'd existed, and lived, and laughed, and fought, and burned bright and angry, had been reduced to granite. A headstone now marked his final resting place. But it did little to still the whispers about how Shane had died, about what happened in those final moments, and about who pulled the trigger, and whether anyone ever really told the truth. Many believe Shane Freeman's death was the opening volley in a war between the Freeman family and the Craig County Sheriff's Office. But like most wars, the groundwork was laid long before the first shot was fired, long before Shane was killed by a sheriff deputy on a rural Oklahoma back road in January of 1999. In fact, some of that groundwork was laid before Shane was even born. Years earlier, Danny Freeman had accidentally shot himself in the head while cleaning a muzzleloader.
Whoa! Let's pump the brakes a little bit there.
I knew we were going to have to pause there.
Accidentally shot yourself in the head.
In the middle of the forehead.
Directly in the middle of the forehead.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, please describe the situation to me because I'm having a hard time getting my head around it.
Yeah, the book didn't go into like a super lot of detail about it.
Unlike that bullet.
What I understand was he was cleaning a muzzle loader.
Yeah.
And so he had it was holding it towards himself, and he leaned over and somehow managed.
He was cleaning it, not loading it.
I don't know. It said cleaning it in the book, but he could have been loading it. Well, I don't know how he was cleaning it or loading it at the time, but what I do know is that he somehow shot himself right in the middle of his forehead and blew off this part of his skull and drove himself to the hospital where they had to take part of his hip bone to replace the piece of skull.
Now the hip bone's connected to the
head bone.
You know, on the surface this sounds problematic.
You mean problematic as in you don't believe it?
No, I mean problematic like it's just a problem. You shot the front part of your skull off on accident.
Yeah.
With a muzzle loader. Was it really an accident?
I don't know. I wasn't there. That's the official story.
There's no more word on
and
how you might dome yourself.
Danny Freeman is not around to answer any questions.
Is it because of the muzzle loader?
No, he lived. But he survived the incident, even driving himself to the hospital with a gunshot wound in the middle of his forehead. It was severe enough to require a bone graft from his hip to repair his shattered skull. But it left a lasting impact. After the accident, people said Danny had a hair-trigger temper and run-ins with law enforcement over the years. As well, there were rumors from those that knew the Freemans that seemed to corroborate this assertion of his hair-trigger temper. His occasional rage-fueled confrontations and a deep-seated distrust of authority are what shaped Danny's worldview and his contentious relationship with law enforcement. So when Shane was shot and killed by a deputy who claimed the teenager had reached for a gun, Danny didn't see a tragic misunderstanding, he saw an execution. The Freeman family considered a wrongful death suit. The sheriff's office closed ranks, and a quiet hostility in Craig County began to boil. But for Ashley, it was her first birthday without her big brother. The first one marked not just by candles and cake, but by the empty space left behind. Since Shane's death, life hadn't felt safe. The sheriff's deputies didn't just patrol, they lingered. They drove slowly past the Freeman property, watching as Ashley stepped off the school bus, keeping their presence known. A presence that felt like the icy fingers of a silent threat sliding down your spine.
Silent but deadly threat. There's a lot of fart innuendo happening.
I just said a silent threat. I didn't say deadly.
It started before that. It started with lingering.
The sheriff's deputies didn't just patrol, they lingered.
Yeah, there it is.
They drove slowly past the Freeman property, watching as Ashley stepped off the school bus, keeping their presence known.
They call that crop dusting.
A presence that felt like the icy fingers of a silent threat sliding down your spine.
That's fart language.
So when Ashley invited her best friend Laura to spend the night on her 16th birthday, it wasn't just a party, it was a reach for something normal. A grasp at stability in a world that felt tilted and off balance, like everything around her had started to tip, and one wrong move could send the whole thing sliding. Out of control, beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond safety, just like her brother now out of reach forever. So the Bibles let their daughter Laura, Ashley's best friend, join the celebration at the Freeman trailer that December night. As Laura headed out with fresh clothes and a smile, her mother reminded her of a dentist appointment the next morning. Neither of them realized that by the next day, it would be Laureen and Jay Bible who would feel their world spin out of control. The morning of December 30th, Laureen Bible was already on the clock managing the McDonald's in a small town near Welch, Oklahoma, just like any other day. A police officer walked in, nothing unusual in a small town. But this time, he wasn't there for coffee or a McMuffin. He was there for her. He didn't speak loudly, and he didn't have to. His face carried the weight before his words ever landed. There'd been a fire, he told her. The Freeman's trailer was gone, destroyed. They'd found a body in the wreckage. And Laura's car? Laura's car was still in their driveway. In that moment, a mother's instinct flared, screaming through the quiet. I have to find Laura. I have to find my baby. When Laureen and Jay Bible arrived at the Freeman property, they were desperate to find their daughter. Investigators, however, exhibited no such urgency. They stood around waiting for the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to take over the scene. The Bibles weren't even told how many bodies had been located. The lack of information and apparent inaction only deepened their despair. For 5 agonizing hours, Laureen and Jay Bible stood sentry at the edge of the crime scene. The yellow tape stretched between them and the remains of the Freeman trailer like a cruel barrier, keeping them from answers, from action, and maybe from their daughter. At 2 p.m., the medical examiner finally arrived, a woman who, by some twist of fate, knew Laureen personally. Breaking with protocol, she leaned in and quietly whispered what she wasn't supposed to say. The body they had found was that of a woman who had borne children and wore a wedding ring. It wasn't Laura. Relief hit like a flash flood, but it didn't last, because the next thought, the one that followed on its heels, crashed in harder. If it's not Laura, then where is she? And then came the louder question, the one that rang out above the rest. If the girls aren't in the trailer, why isn't anyone looking for them? As word spread and smoke lingered in the air, the Freeman property began to draw a crowd, neighbors, friends, and people who loved Laura and Ashley. They came with questions and probably the Southern salve for all things tragic, hot casseroles, and clenched jaws. And as the crowd grew, so did the pressure. 4 people were known to have been in that trailer after Ashley's boyfriend Jeremy Hurst left the night before. Only one had been accounted for, presumed to be Kathy Freeman, the woman found dead in the ashes. That left 3 names unspoken in the debris: Danny Freeman, Ashley Freeman, and Lauria Bible. Laureen and Jay Bible thought the arrival of the OSBI would shift the energy. The state investigators would take the reins, recognize the urgency, and begin the search for the 2 missing girls and a father who hadn't been seen since the flames. But they were wrong. Because law enforcement didn't see a mystery, they saw a manhunt. They believed Danny Freeman had snapped, killed his wife, and fled with Ashley and Laura. It wasn't a crime scene to them. It was a fugitive's last known location. They weren't looking for the missing girls. They were chasing a story they had already decided was true. Danny Freeman was no stranger to the Craig County Sheriff's Office. He was well known, and not in a way that made anyone feel comfortable. He told his small circle of family and friends more than once, "If anything ever happens to me, start with the Craig County Sheriff's Office." It sounded like paranoia, until it didn't. Danny had accidentally shot himself in the head while cleaning a muzzleloader, and while he survived, he was not unchanged. The injury left him with debilitating migraines and a hair-trigger temper. And there were stories, ugly ones, that he'd once put Kathy through a wall during a fight, that he whipped Shane so badly that the boy was removed from the home and taken in by friends. According to Shane's best friend, it was actually the threat of being sent back home that pushed Shane over the edge and into the deadly confrontation that had ended his life. A confrontation with a Craig County deputy that Danny would never forgive. It was the spark that ignited a burning need for revenge, one that everyone could see ran just beneath the surface of Danny's countenance like hot lava. One crack, and the explosive results could be devastating. To the sheriff's department, Danny Freeman was a known quantity. Volatile, possibly using drugs, always angry, always watching. They believed they had him figured out, and they believed he had been the one to set the fire to cover up whatever he'd done to Kathy that ended her life, and then he'd taken the girls and fled. And allegedly, they told the Bibles as much. That they shouldn't go looking for the girls. That the safest thing to do was wait, let Danny cool off. Because if law enforcement showed up too strong, too fast, they feared he might be waiting, ready to take his revenge for Shane's death in the most final way possible. When OSBI agent Steve Nutter arrived at the Freeman crime scene, he stepped out like a caricature of frontier justice. Cowboy boots polished, Stetson hat perched just right, and likely a badge that caught the morning sun. But more than that, he came armed with something else, a head full of bias. He surveyed the scene, examined the lone body pulled from the rubble, and began collecting leads. But the real evidence he took to heart came straight from the Craig County Sheriff's Office. Spoon-fed rumors about Danny Freeman's temper and his hatred of law enforcement, and the theory that he'd murdered his wife and taken the girls and vanished into the hills to plot some apocalyptic payback. And Agent Nutter? He swallowed it whole, making his surname all that much more unfortunate.
I bet he swallowed it.
Agent Nutter interviewed the Bibles like it was routine. He jotted notes, nodded with practiced sympathy, and assured Lorraine and Jay that the girls would be entered into the National Missing Persons database. It sounded official, reassuring even, but it was the kind of reassurance that didn't move trucks or launch search teams. There were no helicopters, no roadblocks, no Amber Alerts, just words and paperwork. For the Bibles, that meeting felt like the first flicker of hope, but as the hours dragged on, that flicker dimmed, and a sickening realization began to set in. The people who should have been looking for their daughter weren't even looking up from the story they were crafting out of the ashes. And then, just like that, the police cleared the scene. No fire marshal investigation, no crime scene tape left fluttering in the wind, no effort to preserve what little evidence the fire hadn't already devoured. They handed the smoldering wreckage over to Danny Freeman's stepbrother Dwayne Vansell and walked away. No trace of the girls, no sign of Danny, just ash, silence, and a theory they'd already decided was the truth. But the people of Welch weren't ready to let the story end there. Neighbors, friends, and strangers mounted horses and climbed onto four-wheelers. They fanned out across the grasslands west of town searching for the girls, for clues, for any scrap of sense in a landscape that suddenly felt foreign and unforgiving. Because if authorities weren't going to look, the people who loved Laura and Ashley would. Dwayne Vansell, though, he didn't stay, he left. But he left with purpose. Police had allegedly told him that they believed his stepbrother Danny had probably taken the girls to the family's old hunting cabin, the place where Danny and Dwayne had been raised. But they weren't going to pursue it yet. They were going to give Danny the night to cool off before confronting him. Dwayne, half hoping they were right, headed for the cabin, headed for the slim, fragile hope that he might find his brother and the girls tucked away in the quiet safety of those woods. That maybe, just maybe, he could shift the story back onto the tracks, tie up the loose ends, and absorb the fallout by bringing everyone home alive. It's funny what you can hope for in moments like these. But the cabin was as empty as the police theory of what had happened. Dwayne found no signs of life, just silence, dust, and echoes. Echoes that bounced off the bare walls and sank into his chest like lead. And as he stood there, in the place where he and Danny had grown up, one warning looped louder than the rest. His brother's voice, sharp and certain. If something happens to me, look at the Craig County Sheriff's Office. The next morning, the Bibles were on a mission. They intended to find their daughter and her friend come hell, high water, or law enforcement. They returned to the Freeman property, only to find the scene abandoned. The crime scene tape was gone, the area unguarded, as if the tragedy had already been neatly packaged and filed away. But Lorraine and Jay weren't ready to move on. They stepped into the charred remains of the trailer, determined to uncover anything others might have missed. Amid the soot and rubble, Jay Bible discovered something investigators had overlooked entirely. Another body. A body with a clear imprint of a boot, as though the day before investigators had stepped right on it and still missed it. Lauria Bible tells Jax Miller the only person wearing cowboy boots that could have made such a boot impression was Special Agent Steve Nutter. It was Danny Freeman. The body laying dead and overlooked on the floor was Danny Freeman. With that discovery, the entire theory law enforcement had built collapsed on itself. Danny hadn't run. Danny was dead, which meant the girls, Ashley and Laura, were truly missing. And they had been missing since the beginning. The Bibles notified law enforcement, but by then they'd already decided the cops were purely ornamental. Lorraine let them stand around with their clipboards, fiddling with their radios, but as far as she was concerned, they were about as useful as the barn cats that roamed the Freeman property, mostly just in her way. So they called in the cavalry. Friends, neighbors, and strangers from across Oklahoma answered Lauria Bible's call. She organized a painstaking grid search of the land surrounding the Freeman property, combing through every inch within a 5 to 10 mile radius of the burned-out trailer. And while others searched fields and fence lines, Lorraine went back into the wreckage, bit by bit, brick by brick, sifting through what remained of the trailer, looking for any signs that her daughter's body might also be hidden beneath the debris. At one point, officers told her she was interfering with their official investigation, but Lorraine didn't blink. She told them straight they'd wasted their chance. Now it was her turn. And in that search, Lorraine found Lauria Bible's purse, still intact, holding her ID and cash. It was confirmation the girls hadn't run away, they'd been taken. But what she didn't find was Laura or Ashley. But the searchers were earnest in their efforts to uncover any clue that might point to the whereabouts of the missing girls. A husband and wife were dead, and not from the fire. That much was becoming clear. Both of them had been shot. And Ashley and Laura were still gone. Among the volunteers was a private investigator who spotted something strange near the Freeman driveway, an insurance card. It belonged to a woman who didn't live in the area, someone with no known ties to the Freeman family. That card had no business being there. When he tried to hand it over to police, they were busy with the vital work of holding clipboards and presumably comparing the size of their cowboy hats, and they scoffed at the discovery, dismissing it as unimportant.
There's also the shine of their boots to consider.
There is. A potential clue, maybe the only clue, as to where the girls had gone was tossed aside with the flick of a wrist by men obviously more interested in playing dress-up as cops than solving a double murder and double disappearance. So the man who found it, the private investigator, he kept it. He slipped it into his file, unsure if it meant anything, but unwilling to let it disappear like everything else in this case. Years would pass before anyone realized just how far that card might reach, and just how close it had come to being lost forever. In hindsight, the insurance card was just one of many missed opportunities, one more clue buried, and not by the fire, but by apathy. Apathy failed to bring in an arson investigator, failed to preserve the evidence, failed to do a detailed walkthrough and document what the flames had left behind. Just assumptions, half-baked theories, and men with badges ready to pack up and move on. But that was just the beginning. When Lauria Bible followed up to ensure OSBI agent Steve Nutter had followed through and entered Laura into the National Missing Persons database, just like he'd said he would, she was met with silence. A pause. The officer helping her admitted Laura wasn't in there. Steve Nutter hadn't done as he promised. She was the one that had to push for her daughter to even be counted as missing. Let that sink in. The police hadn't lost track of Lauria Bible and Ashley Freeman. They'd never officially started looking for the girls. It wasn't just that the trail went cold, it's that it was never properly tracked to begin with. And in a case like this, every day of delay was another mile of distance between the truth and the people so desperate to find it. And so we're left with the same questions that burned through Welch in the final days of 1999. Where are the girls? Who killed Kathy and Danny Freeman? What started the fire, and why weren't the police interested in finding out? 2 people were dead, 2 more had vanished, and the people meant to investigate were already looking the other way. Beneath the surface of the small Oklahoma town, something was shifting. Something dark, something dangerous. And if the right questions kept getting asked, it might just step out into the sunlight. Next time on Crime to Burn, the town of Welch begins to whisper. Oh good, the cat's here.
Now my day is complete. Yo, vamonos!
Go lay down. Go take a nap.
Usually we're just in a mountain of trash, trying to fight for air.
Hide the squirrels.
That's its tapeworm. Broadcasting live from a house full of judgment and Jell-O salad. I'm still emotionally stable despite the guest bathroom being out of toilet paper. And this week's background ambience is brought to you by passive-aggressive dishwashing. I only feel aggressive. I never feel passive. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to fit in this hole. I'm supposed to provide my alias. And yes, I do plan to label my leftovers now. Reporting live from the only room without unsolicited parenting advice. And I'm still unclear on why my coffee making technique is interesting.
I'm currently wanted in 3 states for asking too many questions.
I would suggest that you're unwanted in 3 states.
I'm the only man to ever get kicked out of a fire safety seminar for being too enthusiastic.
That's actually a true story.
Your co-host and official lighter fluid taste tester. Don't try this at home.
There's no way I'm admitting to that. But I will taste just about anything once.
I'm not a lawyer, but I do own a trench coat and ask great questions.
Is that weird that I own more than one trench coat?
No. I don't know what that means.
Whew, brush up on your German. You're an uber idiot.
I'm just going to stay an uber idiot.
You lost me professionally. Address the elders in the room, man. Grow a sack. I take that back. Don't grow a sack.
I know, that would make things weird.
I thought about it. Is there like a handshake or like... I feel like I don't know what to do with my hands. That's just a finger. This is why I can look up to your dad. He does the right thing. He's responsible. He set the bar too high.
Sometimes death comes like a gentle period at the end of a sentence. I can't.
Have you ever had a gentle period?
I'm a professional.
Is that what you tell yourself?
The imposter syndrome is strong.
I think you should listen to that little voice. Hey,
I'm good.
Hey.
I am stoned.
You're stoned?
No.
This is a podcast. There's a certain point geographically where you go north enough that just cooking goes out the window and it's just survival and you're eating blubber and you're dipping toast into bacon grease. IER, right?
THEI.
EI?
EI. I don't know.
I'm dyslexic, dude. This is hard.
I have to write it down.
Symbols for partial words. We call those letters.
Wingdings. Today.
She speaks fluent wingding. The only reason I can understand her is because I'm wearing my new Google AI glasses. There's wingdings, webdings, there's many dings.
Wingdings.
Sometimes I feel like I'm being misquoted. Well, maybe exactly what you were looking at wasn't wingdings, and I can tell the difference between, say, wing and webdings, just at a glance.
Maybe you meant hieroglyphics.
Well, now I've lost all context for what we're talking about. What do you mean hieroglyphics? I don't know how to read hieroglyphs. Jeez, God, man, that's hard. You need like a stone, a special rock to know that. I don't have that rock. I got a lot of rocks, but I don't have that one. Was that like a magic spell or something? Maybe I didn't understand something. Is this bitch cast some magic spells? 2000 party over, out of time. I can't get the song out of my head. I can't focus on what you're saying. All I can think of is partying like it's 1999 now. It's supposed to clean your barrel out for you. All right, I'm slow, right?
His occasional...
That's occasional.
Yeah.
That's down further south.
His occasional...
Acadian.
Damn it.
Ooh, I like that one.
And a badge that caught...
His badge what?
When OSBI agent Steve Nutter arrived at the Freeman crime scene.
Isn't that what you would expect from a nutter? To arrive? He finally came.
Agent Nutter... He
swallowed his own nutter.
And strangers mounted horses and climbed onto four-wheelers.
Sounds like a good time.
Neighbors...
Oh, no.
Like, screws are just unscrewing themselves around you today. No, you still told me to pause after butt.
Welch. Down, go down. I just saw a whole cowboy movie. Or was it whispering? We need nutter butter. I just want to punch this motherfucker already.
Except for, I think he's dead now.
Yeah, that's going to be awkward.
I think you know what I'm putting down.
I smell what you're picking up.
Yep.
There would be no irony if I didn't understand how it works. There was a butter jerk. There was a butter joke earlier that I let slide. Now I wish I could remember it. What were you saying about butter earlier? Maybe I had nutter butter in the chamber so long that... What do you call that word? You like vapor lock, but like with liquid? Sometimes you gotta glaze a muffin. It's just always gonna be naughty. I'm not good at math.
Do you think there is even a calculus podcast out there?
Like a big swollen thumb. I've never even used my thumb. We're gonna use the thumb today, baby. I have super strong thumbs. Stamina. It's about stamina. If your thumbs can't handle it, man, you're not gonna last. You're gonna get thumb fatigue.
I thought you were gonna make another fart joke.
Dude, I could doom half this planet with my farts. I just got to get the right altitude, trajectory, weather conditions. I feel like we could focus my farts on specific parts of the planet and make it better. When you smell the farts of truth, you can awaken into the next dimension of reality. I think we could provide enlightenment, or at least a warm snuggle.
Dutch ovens for world peace.
We should just fart into the nostrils of these so-called leaders until they just submit to justice and mercy. It would be like nosing the Gooch of Buddha. And now we make the noise. Sense to your soul the redemptive value of my methane through your nostrils.
Feel like a new woman.
I think you're using the bidet wrong. Why are you the captain of this ship? I might wake up one morning and can do math. We'll see what the trauma is on the way. Wait, we didn't say anything clever. Is this a cry for help?
Oh no, I'm not having a psychotic episode, but my butt is asleep. Okay, signing off.
Welcome to Primetime